It's my nerd world, and welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast. On this week's episode, Leaving Them Wanting Mori, Depeche Mode on tour. Construction Time Again celebrates its 40th anniversary, and your listener feedback.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
It is my nerd world, and welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with another episode this week. Let's not waste any more time. The band is currently still on hiatus. I had a listener that pointed out it wasn't Dave that was posting some of his the highlights of his vacation. It was actually his wife on social media that was doing the posting. So thank you for pointing that out. A couple of new articles this week. First off, we'll start off with this one from IQ Magazine. Lengthy piece titled Leaving Them Wanting Mori, Depeche Mode on Tour. Now, I didn't grab the entirety of the article. It gets into a lot of the technical aspects of the tour itself, getting into the minutia of what life is like on the road with Depeche Mode. But again, from more of a technical standpoint, I did grab some fairly large chunks that I found interesting that I wanted to share with you. Stage Truck has been transporting the band's set and equipment since the 1980s, and the founder, Robert Hewitt, tells IQ that when he established the company, one of his primary goals was actually to work with Depeche Mode. He says, the boys are great. Their history with Vince Clarke, who left, and then Fletch, who sadly passed away last year, gives them the grit and longevity to have come through the most difficult of times. And the band's manager and guiding light, Jonathan Kessler, combined with their longtime PM, Tony Gittins, makes for a dynamic and happy team who are always a pleasure to work with. He adds, on this current tour, it's clear that Depeche Mode's new material, along with a refresh of their classic hits, is a winning formula in drawing fans old and new to see one of their best shows ever. To still be relevant in this time of multiple music genres is a testament to their ability to bring something engaging and different to the party, making sure that they need the trucks is to keep a bare minimum. Gittins reveals a strategy that other bands would do well to follow. We use local stages and delays everywhere we go, he tells IQ. If there's already a stage in the sit-to, then why not use it? For sustainability, it works a lot better. And to me, it's just common sense. I've been doing it for years. I allow Stageco to go through all the local promoters and to do deals directly with them. So this sounds as if instead of bringing the stages with them, they just use whatever is available locally. Luckily, Depeche Mode are a great band, and Dave Gahan is one of the best frontmen. So we don't need the bells and whistles that other acts take on the road. The performance speaks for itself. Representing an act who have built a reputation on their live performance has also helped in dealing with the spiraling costs of touring. Costs have gone up less than we had worried they would, but still a substantial increase, says Kessler. We're blessed that we have a big enough margin because we're so lean. Even so, when we look at what we spend now versus what we spent on the last tour, the percentage increase is very large. We pride ourselves on good decision-making, so it's still manageable. That sensible approach to life on the road means that the core crew for the Memento Mori tour comprises just 46 people plus drivers. We use local crews of about 66, explains the production manager. The feel-good factor of Depeche Mode rolling into town is palpable among the promoters involved with the Memento Mori production. To date, more than 2 million fans have witnessed the show, while management predicted that the forthcoming 40-date North American arena leg and the indoor shows in Europe early next year will take that to a total of around 3.5 million hard tickets sold by the end of the tour. Another element that helps elevate Depeche Mode's live shows is the enthralling films and visuals that accompany each song. Crafted by long-term collaborator Anton Corbijn, He's also the creative mind that works with the artists on set design, the centerpiece of which on the current tour is an 8-meter M at center stage. Corbijn's been a part of the Depeche Mode camp for 30 years. The first time was in 93 when I was part of a bidding kind of thing with around 6 other people in total. And much to the surprise of management, they chose me. Obviously, Anton is speaking specifically about the stage design. We know that Anton had been working with the band in terms of photography before that time. But even Corbijn was quickly made aware of the stripped-back approach that the band has for touring. I was maybe too ambitious, he laughs. My first tour design involved 2 stages on top of each other, and in those days you had to use projectors, which all had to start at the same time. It was complex, but I didn't know any better. So halfway through the tour, they made it simpler by just reducing it to 1 stage. Now that, that's really interesting to me because I think we can agree the set design, the stage design for the first half of the devotional tour was absolutely spectacular. And I'd often wondered why they never went back to that complex design again. And clearly, when they got to the exotic portion of the devotional tour, they had stripped it down. They had taken his visuals and broken them up to 1 bigger screen in the back as opposed to the smaller screens. And they never went back since. And clearly, it's because it was entirely too complicated. With the passing of Fletch, Corbijn says, the removal of a principal from the stage was subtly changed the setup. Instead of everything being 90 degrees to the audience on the stage itself, we've angled the energies of Dave and Martin more towards each other. And I think consciousness is that it's a good... I think consensus is that it's a good development. It's been a really long day, by the way. I'm just saying. I've had an incredibly long day, but I was excited to do the show, so that's why I didn't want to wait another day. Talking about his set design, which spectacularly showcases his video content, Corbijn notes there's basically 1 big LED screen, and then there's another LED screen in the shape of the M in front of it. Sometimes within the M, there's different content to what's going on behind it. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's opposite movement. That sort of negative-positive thing. While from his creative point of view, Corbijn says it's frustrating that cameras on phones mean that it's impossible to surprise the audience after the first night of a tour. He nonetheless observes, I think people enjoy themselves too, and when they recognize something that they've seen on social media. The band itself views Corbijn as a key member. The ethos has always been to have a video-heavy show, says Kessler. We put a lot of effort into the design and the content creation, so we're very fortunate to have Anton, who's done the video content for 30 years, and who makes sure the show is impactful and artistic. For those looking for the entire article, it's iqmag.com. iq-mag.com, leaving them wanting Mori, Depeche Mode on tour. It's a really interesting read, and as I mentioned, I didn't want to grab it in its entirety. There tends to be a lot of really detailed information relating to just the touring aspect of it, less about the creative element of it, which is what I wanted to share with you. Moving on in this week's episode, it is kind of a landmark week for the band. From The Quietest, they've put up a lengthy piece, A Balancing Act, Depeche Mode's Construction Time Again at 40. Depeche Mode were already pop stars, but it was their intersection with the world of industrial music on their 3rd album that ensured their longevity, says writer Ned Raggett. I'm a fan of Construction Time Again. I don't like it as much as, say, Some Great Reward, but it was one of those albums early in my fandom of Depeche Mode that really continued to cement my love of the band, just because it showcased the diversity of what they could accomplish. And you take Construction Time Again, you look at some of the classics on that song, which I'll share on that album, which I'll share with you a bit from this Quietest piece. And, there's still music today that compares and can be set right side by side with some of the albums from Construction Time again. And particularly, you look at a track like Everything Counts and People Are People. I've mentioned this before on previous shows. People Are Good. Listen to those two songs side by side, and they complement each other really, really well. I really do love this album. It's not one that I go back to quite often, but when I'm in that really old school Depeche Mode mood, and I'm not diving into Black Celebration or Music for the Masses or Some Great Reward, on occasion, Construction Time again just hits that right nostalgic, emotional note. And for that, I really appreciate the record. Here's a bit of what The Quietist had to say about Construction Time celebrating its 40th anniversary. This album really does sound like a series of machines suddenly activated and then set in motion. Some Great Reward expanded on the trend, but this is where the model emerges in full, with the secret always being the idea that there's something about a damn good rhythm. This isn't Kraftwerkian, so stiff it's funky, for all that there was the rage among those who were stuck with ideas of authenticity and realness. What was truer was how the heavier songs delivered those big beats and played with them. One of More Than a Party's best moments comes right at the end when the rhythm relentlessly accelerates while Gahan's voice doesn't, leading to a sudden click and break that settles into a rattling train noise that introduces Pipeline. And that's a really great observation of the combination of those two songs and what makes Construction Time unique among all of Depeche Mode's albums. Perhaps the most literally industrial pop song of the entire album being Pipeline, with a lyric based around, indeed, Construction Time again, if on a metaphorical level. It really does feel like a work song, a slow slamming main beat, counterpoint bangings and scrapes and clatters in place as it goes. In the seeming center of it all, Gore's lead vocal, recorded live under a train arc while the music itself played from another speaker. It feels like a slightly muffled voice reaching through the gears. Gahan and others joining in on the titular lines as a chorus. At the time, it might have been seen or heard as a cousin to something like Spandau Ballet's Muscle Bound. Now it feels like a perfect radio drama in miniature, something that the BBC Radiophonic Workshop would have killed for, and it comfortably lets the arrangement play out well beyond the final sung words, a pleasure in its own creation. The album only has 2 singles. The second appeared after its release and rather lives in its shadow. It's not really the preamble to Construction as such, but the opening number of Love in Itself serves as a handy introduction or reintroduction if you prefer the band in general. Gahan's playing with his vocals on the verses, more of a distinct twist in his voice, something that easily contrasts with his more commanding tone on the choruses. What makes it work is how things play around with the arrangement. The sudden drop-ins of piano and acoustic guitar on the track, not to mention the sudden finger click, the shadings and textures that drop in and out throughout the song, warm bell tones ringing through the choruses, a suddenly looped and treated vocal snippet. If you knew nothing about the group other than the stereotype of their sound, Love in Itself is the song you might imagine, but it still works. But there was another single, one that came before the album's release. I mentioned People Are People because it is indeed that massive and that amazing, a sonic culmination of what they achieved with this album turned into monumentalism so perfect even America couldn't deny it, though the really big hits there came sometime later. But Everything Counts is the blueprint. Charting a number 6 in the UK and scoring high placements elsewhere in Europe, the fact that it's the one that Depeche still happily play on tour while People hasn't been touched in decades is telling. That amazing scraping sound alone at the beginning just behind the mix of those massive beats is still a wonder and a classic accident. Miller revealed years later that they were simply playing around with some of the equipment, and that was the result. Everything Counts contains music box melodies, plus the sounds of sparkling chimes and reedy melodicas, while the bass and the beats pound in dance floor command. Meanwhile, Gore's lyric was, well, capitalism summed up. Handshakes sealing contracts, a career in Korea, being insincere, everything counts in larger amounts. It was pure X equals X. It wasn't Das Kapital or even trying to be. It just said, here it is, and rhymed while it was at it. But Gahan delivered the verses with a commanding glower, Wilder adding a lyrical repetition here and there, just so in the live performance, while Gore's sweet vocals took the chorus to another level, the serene brightness that masked the bitterness and turned it all into a playground chant. 5 years later, as 101 showed, a crowd of 70,000 people at the Rose Bowl absolutely would not let them go, singing that chorus again and again, even after the band had fully stopped. That doesn't happen without a hard connection. I can't encourage you enough to go and check out that article. That is just a snippet from the article celebrating the 40th anniversary of Construction Time Again from The Quietist, where you can go and find that. And I don't know about you, but I really appreciated the author's writings on this one. I felt that he was able to really capture the spirit of that album in that portion that I read, and in the entirety of the article itself, in a way that few have done. And I'll take this moment to mention that if you enjoy that type of examination into Depeche Mode's music, I would encourage you to, again, check out the book that I mentioned last week by Brian J. Robb, On Track, Depeche Mode, Every Song, Every Album. I have a listener feedback that we'll get to here in a moment that references it. But again, if you enjoyed what I just shared with you from The Quietist with regard to Construction Time Again, definitely go and check out Brian's album, because you'll get very much more of the same. All right, let's get to your feedback. Remember, at any point, if you want to reach out to Depeche Mode, the podcast, you can do so by emailing talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube if you happen to be listening there. You can use the Jon Justice, Jon, as well. TalkShowNerd is the one that I typically throw out there, but I've got a couple, and if that's too hard to remember, then the Jon, Jon Justice, thejonjustice@gmail.com. That one works as well. They all land in the same email box. All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. First one comes from, and I'm going to try to get this right. I'm going to jump to the end of the email. This is you're all friends of the show, but Jork has written quite a bit, and I've been mispronouncing his name. He writes at the end of this week's email, lately you've pronounced it like George. This is the correct way to write it, and he wrote it for me. He said, I thought it would be easier without the dots on the O. Anyhow, it's pronounced like work, but with a J instead of a W. So I'm going with Jork. So I hope I was closer that time. Thank you for the email and the opportunity to share it with everybody. Greetings from Germany, near Hamburg once again. Thank you for your podcast. I really enjoy listening to you. Thank you. This time, I'd like to give you my opinion on the possible promo clip to Don't Say You Love Me and the making of Speak to Me. I can very well imagine a promo clip to Don't Say You Love Me in an old castle with a vampire couple in it. Of course, it shall be shot in black and white, and it should be in the style like Nosferatu from the 1920s. It's a classic movie. I guess this would go really well with the song. Now, you said Speak to Me was made by Marta Solongny and James Ford, based on the a cappella of Dave. Now, Wikipedia says that Christian Eigner was involved too. That is true. I wonder if it really is a Depeche Mode track, if you consider it was produced in a way where the music itself was not made by Martin and Dave. It is a great track, though. Another thought, what if you give the a cappella to an AI and tell the AI to design Depeche Mode sounds around it? The result would be very interesting. But would it also be a Depeche Mode track? Maybe something to discuss. Best wishes to all the listeners and you. Thank you very much, Jork. Hope I got that right. Yeah, the AI aspect of it I find really, really fascinating. Especially from the standpoint that the guys aren't going to be with us forever and won't be singing, forever. And there's a possibility that their music could live on in AI in a number of different ways. Much in the same way that you see actors and actresses signing off on their likenesses. You can see the same thing happening in music. The technology is with regard to AI is moving very fast. So I suppose we'll probably have more questions very soon as clever individuals utilize AI and create their own Depeche Mode style music. Next up, instrumental electronic music writes, I will leave the concert if they play Before We Drown, as I mentioned last week, in protest. It is the worst song they have ever released. Even worse than Hole to Feed. Now, that's a bold statement right there. So, listen, this speaks to the subjectivity of art, right? Thank you for the feedback. And I would like to offer up some individuals who feel differently, who also happen to write in about Before We Drown, not even aware that you had made that comment. Before We Drown is my favorite. Should be a single and do the same promotion to get it in the top 10 Depeche Mode. Since a kid, New Life, Everything Counts, Shake the Disease. Then they stepped up to the next level with Black Celebration, with the Black Celebration album to Ultra, and then this album back to a top level now, writes Andre Dobny. Thank you, Andre. Lars Gunthel writes, Before We Drown is my favorite song on Memento Mori. Would be fantastic to see it and a few others included in the set list. As for older songs, I would love to see Lie to Me, Sun and the Rainfall make surprise appearances in the set. Unlikely to happen, but people are still allowed to dream. Yeah, I mean, the Sun and the Rainfall goes back to what Dave had said in those early interviews before the album came out about the possibility that they could go and perform that track, and unfortunately, we had not seen it yet. Melissa writes, Oi, if they add Before We Drown and if Martin regularly starts performing home, I need to get another show. Obsessed with Before We Drown still. Standout favorite on Memento Mori. Live would be amazing. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate the feedback. Next up, we go to Danielle Manette, who writes, All you had to say was that you were light on listener feedback for me to start typing. I would never miss an opportunity to talk about Depeche Mode to anybody who's willing to listen. First thing, I was able to confirm this week that I will be seeing our boys again in November. I am beyond excited, and I'm looking forward to maybe hearing some of their alternative tracks on the set list. They did A Question of Lust, Soul with Me, and Waiting for the Night back in April, and I would love to hear either Home, Strange Love, But Not Tonight, Condemnation, or anything else they might surprise us with. Speaking of November, that's when I'm going to be seeing the band with my friend Matt. Thank you, Matt. How you doing? In Denver. And I'm curious if there are any listeners to this podcast and you're planning on going to the Denver show, let me know. I'd be down with doing a meetup of Depeche Mode fans who listen to the show. And I'm fairly certain that Matt would be down for that as well. So if you are planning on attending that November Denver show, please reach out. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com or leave a comment up on YouTube. And it'd be fun to get together some listeners of the podcast. Now, Danielle goes on to say, first thing I was able to confirm this week is, I'm sorry, I just read that part, didn't I? Since the last time I wrote, I've been revisiting and discovering remixes. I thought it could be a good subject for the show since the band is on hiatus and the news will be slow for the next few weeks. I agree with you that any remix produced after Violator are not in the same category as the ones before, as they tend to be more techno dance genre. Not that there isn't some real gems in the newer stuff, but the older remixes had a different feel to them. I've created two separate remix playlists, 81 to 91 and 93 to 2023. I'm curious to know what your favorites are in these two categories. Here are mine. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang on to this for next week's episode so I can spend a little bit more time talking about it, because I like the idea and I want to spend some time and not rush through going through the categories and the songs that you put out there. And I would encourage anybody to sort of join in if you want. Drop me an email and also let me know some of your favorite remixes as well, and we can talk a little remixes on next week's show. But Danielle Manette, as always, thank you. With that coming up on next week's episode. Next up, we hear from Withering Flower Child Krista. Hello from Krista. Have you seen the awesome concert video of DM? She's referring to the Primavera Sound. And yes, absolutely. Talked about it on a previous episode. One of the best live videos out there of the tour, just since it was professionally shot. The one thing that is disappointing about the Primavera Sound concert video, though, is that it's all up-close shots of the band, and you don't get any dynamic shots away from the stage to see the visuals, because they've lifted the live stream from the footage they were shooting for the side screens on the stage. But still an absolute fantastic watch for those that haven't seen the Depeche Mode performance from Primavera Sound. Withering Flower Child also says, thank you for alerting me to the new Depeche Mode book. This would be Brian J. Robb, On Track, Depeche Mode, Every Song, Every Album. I just bought it, and I can't wait to read it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to read it for a while, because my ADHD med is on back order right now. That's unfortunate. I also want to read your first book in your series. I was going through Radiation last month and was too sick to read, but I promise I'll get to it. Krista, you take your time and take care of yourself. Our health is oftentimes all we got, and you got to remain healthy. So I hope I sent you the link to the DM concert. You did correctly. Yes, absolutely. I think it's as good or even better than the Touring the Angel concert. Interesting. She certainly liked that one. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Like I said, the only complaint that I had with regard to it was the fact that we just didn't get a good shot of the visuals in the background. But that's fine too, because I'm really looking forward to. I won't be able to go in spoiler-free now to the show, but I don't spend a lot of time watching the tour videos, simply because I want to still be somewhat fresh and not completely familiar with every aspect of the show before I see it and the boys in November. Tool 46 and 2 says, I'm a badass for pulling the full audio from the CBS interview. Unless you were watching on... So, real quick, just a little sidebar on this. Last week's episode, there's two different versions. There's a version that's the podcast one, and then there's the YouTube version, because I made a mistake when I posted it to YouTube and forgot that I was going to get dinged for copyright because of all the song samples that were included in the CBS interview. So I had to go back and edit all of that out to keep it up on YouTube. So if you listened to the podcast and heard it, congrats. Because it wasn't in the YouTube version. Set list wise, Tool 46 and 2 writes, DM has got to revamp this Legs live set. More Memento Mori, and then just go deep. I'm doubtful, though. Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, according to the individual who we talked about last week, who had the chance to have a lengthy conversation with Peter Gordino, he does expect that Before We Drown will be included. I hope they don't just take Before We Drown and slide it into where they've been mixing up My Favorite Stranger and Speak to Me. I wish they would do My Favorite Stranger and Speak to Me and Before We Drown, instead of just giving us one option. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks when the band returns on their North American leg. And lastly, Peter Schaub writes, thanks for your Depeche Mode podcast. Always nice to hear a new episode. Thank you. I started to listen to it a couple of months ago. I've listened to Depeche Mode since '82 when I was 12 years old, and I still listen. I think Memento Mori is great. I also thought it was interesting with the AI songs that sounded like Dave on vocals. And you'd said something about that you had made your own song a long time ago and that you imagined Dave to sing to it. I did that too in 1988, made a kind of homemade pre-AI DM song. When I wrote the demo Heavy Hen, and he shared a link with me, and I appreciated that. A song that sounds a little like It Doesn't Matter Too, mixed with Shake the Disease. And I thought I thought about this when I made it back then. Damned if only Dave or Martin was singing on this song, it would be a hit. It was, of course, never a hit, but I uploaded it anyways for the Afterworld. Maybe someone will like it, or some of the other demos. Keep up the great work. Best regards, Peter Schwab, Stockholm, Sweden. Thank you, Peter. And yeah, man, it's fun. An absolute fun listen. I love hearing people's versions and interpretations of Depeche Mode music. As a matter of fact, that's what the outro to this podcast is essentially that. I made this with GarageBand, by the way. I have about 12 tracks? I made an all-instrumental album, 12 tracks. I must have spent a couple of weeks working on it. I've never shared it with anybody because I figured I'm the only one that would actually really go and enjoy it. So this was called Useful because I made the drums with useless in mind. So thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. That might be the most that I've packed into a single episode in such a short period of time. So listen, I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode as much as I did recording it. As always, if you want to support my nerd world and you like to read, I hope you'll check out my science fiction adventure series, EMBARK. Filled with some romance, a lot of action. It's an epic sci-fi saga, 7 books in total, available in ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. I wrote it for adults, but it's great for ages 11 years old and up. You can head on over to Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net and check it out. So I hope you'll do so if you haven't done so already. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member to sci-fi. Amazon.com, mynerdworld.net. As Earth faces its end, fellow pilots Taft and Catha and their crew are on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. And I got a lot of Depeche Mode references in there. So if you dig sci-fi, go and check it out. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic week. Wherever you are, I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. And I hope you're safe. We'll talk to you next week. I look forward to hearing from you as well. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin